Today is Tuesday, May 31st, 2011. My name is Caitlin McKenna, and I'm here with Chris Finn, who's the chief of the Gold Hill Fire Protection District since 1996. His family has owned the Gold Hill Inn and Bluebird Lodge in Gold Hill, Colorado since 1962, and he has lived in Gold Hill since the early 1960s. This is an oral history interview for the Maria Rogers Oral History Project. Chris, could you tell me when and where you were born?
I was born in Boulder in the sanitarium in 1955.
And when did you move up to Gold Hill?
We moved up to Gold Hill in the early 60s. I don't know exactly when.
Could you tell me a bit about growing up in Gold Hill and your family up here?
Okay, a bit. Okay. Well, it seemed normal enough to me. Growing up in the mountains, there were two other families in town, so not a lot to do, but there was lots of trees to go walking out in the woods. But we grew up with basically no modern facilities, such as bathrooms and running water and such, for the first few years. That's when we were up at the ranch, up at the now known as the Colorado Mountain Ranch. It was potbelly stove in the middle of the room, and that was about it.
How long did you live was it Trojan Ranch then?
Yes, it was Trojan Ranch. One winter. And we almost didn't make it through that. And then my parents found down at the other end of town, which is now the Red Store, and they bought that place.
And could you tell me a bit about growing up working at the Gold Hill Inn?
Well, actually, when I was growing up, I would work there off and on, not that much full-time, not like my children. It was, kind of helping out here and there, and if somebody didn't show up for work. But I didn't really get serious into it until the mid-70s. That's when I got hardcore into the Gold Hill Inn.
And by hardcore into the Gold Hill Inn, what do you mean?
I mean 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, plus.
What were you doing?
I started out as running the front end of the operation, doing the bartending and maitre d' and such, because my brother Brian was going to school in Florida. When he came back, he took over the front, and I moved to the back and started doing the cooking.
What sort of other jobs or responsibilities have you had around Gold Hill?
Besides being fire chief, or?
Well, yeah, including that.
Well, that's basically fire chief and helping neighbors out when they needed help, which is all the same thing. That's why I'm fire chief.
When did you become involved with the Gold Hill Fire Department?
Oh, let me think here. That was the first time Mason's house burned. I was really young. Younger than a teenager, how's that? I can't remember what year, but it's the type of thing back then. Everybody helped out when there was a problem. Basically, the older folks put the fire out, and then we all got to drag the furniture out and deal with the soot and everything. But yes, so that's...
So when did you have more of an official title with the Gold Hill Fire Department?
Well, official work, let's see, the first... I don't know. See, we would show up, when there was something happening, we would show up and they would tell us to go cut a fire line, which we weren't officially firefighters, but we were. The first official was probably Black Tiger Fire, because I was actually given a crew rather than just a shovel.
Could you tell me a little bit about the Black Tiger Fire and your role in that?
Well, let's see, the Black Tiger, it was bad. But starting out, our first shift that we went over there was probably the strangest firefighting I've ever done, because we were given a package of fusees and told to walk from the point of origin up Boulder Canyon and light the other side of the road, so that in the morning when the fire heated back up, it couldn't go back across the creek. But we had never I had never in Gold Hill fought fire with fire before that. It was just
Was that a
strange.
new innovation across the board?
No, I think the Forest Service had been doing it for years. We just didn't know about it. We had never had a big forest fire up here. Well, yes, we had, but that was before the Forest Service was around.
Do you know stories about the forest fires? From
No, because that
1900?
was there weren't really any people left around. But in the 1890s, yeah, that was nobody left around.
No stories passed down.
Not really.
Could you tell me a bit about the pathway to becoming chief, Gold Hill?
The pathway to becoming chief. Well, it was basically I probably shortly after the Black Tiger fire, I got more involved with the fire department. I was there all the time. I was there for every call because I work in Gold Hill, as opposed to a lot of the people who work in Boulder. And I think that was probably one of the major reasons why I became chief, is because I'm here all the time. But as for training, etc., back then there wasn't really any. There were no requirements for that.
What sort of firefighting innovations have been made since you first started firefighting?
Well, the biggest one is probably the foam. We started out with just simple dumping soap into the water of the tank of the trucks to make the water wetter so it soak in and actually stay there as opposed to run off. We now have injection systems and compressed air foam systems and just so many different things. You actually have foam that will stick to a house and stay there for an hour.
How have these affected your work?
Well, made it more complicated. Every time they come up with a new system, then you have to learn how to use it. But we haven't really gotten a chance to use those. This last fire came through a little too fast for us to use that.
Who teaches you how to use those?
Mostly ourselves. Every once in a while we'll get an outside instructor, but it's reading the books, studying the materials, and then we just several of the officers from the 3 fire departments around get together and figure out the best way to teach the class.
What are the usual types of fires that the department responds to?
Most of the fires that we respond to, buddy down, are campfires left by people who have their campfires and then don't put them out when they leave in the morning. That's the majority. That's probably at least 10 or 12 a year, because we have them on alto out in our district.
Are those emergencies or?
No, those aren't. Well, if the wind's blowing, they're emergencies. And actually, as a rule of thumb, we have to treat them like emergencies, because unlike the paid firefighters, we all have jobs to go back to. So if we just do it casually and take a couple hours to put it out, then it won't work, because we just lose that much work time.
What type of other emergencies do the fire department respond to?
We go on a lot of calls in Left-Hand Canyon. Cars, bicyclists, motorcyclists, driving too fast for the road and just going in the creek or running into each other.
What fires or emergencies stick out in your mind?
The major ones, well, last September we had a pretty big one. And as the other weird thing is, probably, I'm thinking 3 weeks before that, maybe 4 weeks before that, we had a big house fire down Left Hand. Black Tiger fire, both of the old stage fires. We had one up in Beaver Reservoir and several of them down Left-Hand Canyon.
Could you tell me about the day that the 4 Mile fire started?
Okay. Day the 4 Mile. Well, okay, we were getting ready, cranking up our barbecue. We do a Labor Day barbecue. About, I don't know what time, because luckily I wear my radio when that's happening, especially when it's that dry. But the pager went off. I'm told it was around 10 o'clock. I went and looked out in the back, and there was a small plume of smoke. It was nothing. I wasn't too concerned. About an hour later, my pager went off again, and it had grown considerably. It was at that point standing in the backyard of the Gold Hill, and it looked like a lot like the Black Tiger fire. Even though it was a whole lot closer, it looked just about exactly the same. Just big, giant, black, nasty plume of smoke coming at us. About that time, I went through the place and told several of the people who lived down in that area that they should go down and get stuff out now while they could.
You mean in the inn?
In the inn, yes. Sorry. Proceeded up to the fire station to see what all was going on, see how many firefighters I had, etc. Because our first group of firefighters had left about an hour before that in our best truck. And it turned out that was on that day more than half of our fire department had left town and was not able to get back to town. So we pulled the trucks out, and there were two of us, my assistant chief and I, Donald Maloney. And luckily, just after we pulled the second truck out, all these folks from Ward came pulling into town, and so we did a really quick powwow and went over the trucks and put them on our trucks and had them follow. We went out to Dixon Road to look at a nightmare.
And then what happened?
Well, about that time, let's see, when we got out there, a group from Sunshine showed up, and I was informed that I had Max, one of the locals, Max Yeager, headed out there with a cat. So basically on the bottom side of Dixon Road, we set the cat to work just clearing a line and then burning around houses to try and save houses. That was the only thing we could do. The fire was so big and coming so fast that the only way we could fight it was hopefully just burn out enough fuel around the houses and save them, possibly. So I got, time is a very strange thing. I don't know whether it was 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours between that, when we started and when we got run off there, because it was just, it kind of stood still as the fire came at us, and it was coming at us, which would have been up towards the northwest, and then then I was watching it, and it would go this way, and then it would go this way, and so pretty much it was trying to get all the way around us. And so at a certain point, we just called it. We said, okay, we've got to get out of here. And so we went back to the town of Gold Hill. Half stayed in the town of Gold Hill to check everything out here. The other half of us went up to the Trojan Ranch, which was, at that point, they were probably halfway done back burning around the ranch, the old ranch the lodge building, which is the reason why it's still left. And as it was burning down the hill, we noticed to the west big flames coming at us, which had come up through Long Gulch and kind of come around. Once again, fire was trying to come around to get us. And so we sent some folks up there to try and keep it on the south side of the road so that we had half a chance of fighting it, and started figuring out our options of back burning, etc. And probably within half an hour, that had overrun us too, because there was just so much fuel and so dry. Basically, we probably had 5 or 10% humidity, and the wind was blowing about 50 miles an hour, and it was hitting just about every point of the compass. So yeah, basically then we got run off from Trojan Ranch and went down into Gold Hill. There was a lot of people at the fire station. We basically had everybody who was not a firefighter, we had them evacuate. That's almost done. And at that point, the fire was on the south side of Gold Hill. It was approaching the south side of Gold Hill. We kind of maneuvered down Main Street, had people up on the south side of Gold Hill, which is Hill Street. From down on Main Street, it was starting to get hot. You look up on the mountain and you could not see the top of the flames. Between the black and the red, it all melded into the sky, and there were probably 60, 100-foot flames coming at us. And that was when we also thought about the fact that out of the 4 escape routes that we originally had from Gold Hill, we had 1 left, and it was time to take it.
And that was?
That was going down Lickskillet to Left Hand Canyon. Basically, we went down there, got all the fire trucks refilled with water, moved them down the road a ways, and turned around ready to come back up. Because normally what you will do in that situation is let the flame front come through and go back and try and save any houses that you can. Well, about the time we got, probably the last truck to the bottom and just about filled with water, we had a shift in the wind. It was no longer, the smoke was no longer blowing at us. Smoke was gone. We couldn't see it. And the slurry bomber just came over our heads, and so we knew it was headed to Gold Hill. Shortly after that, we got a radio call from somebody, I don't know. There was a lookout of some type left in Gold Hill. The county had taken over the command by this point. I was no longer in command. But they said to come back up, which surprised us all, because we thought we were down there for a good couple hours waiting for it to burn over Gold Hill. So we got back up there and got trucks up where the fire had been. The slurry bomber had just hit the south side of Gold Hill. The houses were red on one side and black on the other. The yards were. And so had they not come then, it would have been toast.
How close did it get to the side of Hill Street, to those houses?
Well, there's one house that got charred on the back. There was one deck that was halfway burnt. Dick Cole, the top of his water tank melted off. It was a plastic water tank. So yeah, they got very close. The Brighams, their propane tank in front of the house went because it got so hot. They have a safety release valve. And you just hope that when that goes that it actually burns, because then it burns the gas off and it's not gas surrounding you. So luckily that was burning, but it was a nasty sight up there. And there were probably, I don't know, 10, 15 fire trucks up there and 50 or 60 people just knocking out things as fast as they could trying to save Gold Hill. There were people from Broomfield and up in the mountain areas. We had Timberline Fire and we had Ward Fire and Nederland and Coal Creek and just, I don't know where all else from, but all over.
How did they get here? Well,
the people who got to Gold Hill at that point were the ones who disobeyed orders. They did not go to, everybody was called and told to go to staging in Boulder. But all these people in the mountains are going to say, okay, so I can drive 5 or 6 miles to Gold Hill, or I can drive 15 or 20 miles to Boulder and wait for them to send me up to Gold Hill. So they all came in the back way. They're all, most of the people I know, just from the years of fighting fire. But they were not going to go to Boulder when the fire was here. That was kind of what it came down to.
Did that surprise you?
Not really. Boulder County is kind of famous for that, for self-dispatching.
What does that mean?
That means that when there's a lot of, we've had enough of the big giant fires around Boulder County that everybody's a little edgy, so when there's a little fire, people hear about it, they will kind of start heading that direction and sometimes just go emergent that direction because the whole idea is get it knocked out while it's small. And so that's the self-dispatch part of it.
Are there certain communities that self-dispatch more than others?
Yes. Yes, and they tend to be, you know, the mountain communities, because we're basically, if you go back to the old days, there wasn't a tone that came out. There was a telephone call, and it's when your neighbor needs help, your neighbor needs help. It really doesn't. You don't need the sheriff to call you up and say that your neighbor needs help if they need help, and that's.
How did the rest of Gold Hill and these mountain communities react?
Well, everybody was really helpful towards each other, but everybody was, I mean, stunned to begin with. You know, that was just, it can't happen here. Even though we all knew for years and years and years it was going to happen. It was just, we didn't know when. You know, it's the kind of thing you hope, well, maybe I won't see it. But the whole community came together. We had at the fire department set up down in the front room of the Gold Hill Inn, and we got some phone lines run in and got internet and such, so that we could communicate with the folks who had been evacuated and not allowed back in. Once the big danger of the fire was gone, people weren't allowed back in because all the all the power poles had burned. So there was no electricity. So in that meantime, to keep the fire department busy, what we decided to do is we contacted all these folks through all the different ways we had of getting a hold of them, and found out, you know, basically ended up going to just about everybody's house and taking all the food out of their refrigerator, so that when they came back, it wouldn't be full of rotted food and just nasty. And we had a lot of these phone numbers, etc., from people, because early on we had people calling us needing their prescription drugs and, you know, some necessities that we could then get down to them. So we had all the ways of getting into people's houses set up. And it also kind of worked into, there were several chickens left in town, and so we were feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs, and every morning the firefighters would down at the inn would make a big breakfast, all the eggs, and we'd have our breakfast and then go about and do jobs like that, because we weren't allowed to be out fighting the fire because we didn't have the qualifications to work with the feds.
What day do the feds come in?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you for sure. Because, well, it started out, it was the county took over about halfway through the first day. And then the state took over sometime in there, and then the feds took over in there, and it all melds together because nobody wants to just, okay, say it's mine now. They slowly work in there, and so that you don't lose firefighters. You'd hurt people if all of a sudden you just say, okay, this is a federal fire now, not a state fire. You know, you people leave. It's like, it can't work that way. And so we were kind of transitioned out and not really welcome here.
But you stayed up in Gold Hill?
We stayed, yes. We had a small argument with the feds, which then our county sheriff stepped in and took care of and fixed it up for us, so that we as firefighters who have the statutory responsibility to be in this area to take care of things, we're allowed to be up here and just take care of our local area, not the we didn't work the burn except for a couple different nights when they didn't have enough trucks. We were here in case the pager went off, in case something happened on the other side where it hadn't burned yet.
Were other fire departments allowed to do something similar?
Well, I don't think so. From my understanding, Fourmile and Sunshine, which were the other major departments afflicted by this, they more or less left. They were the few people that were trained, that had the qualifications to be a crew boss or an engine boss or whatever, did come back and work. But the majority of them, no, they did not.
Where did they go?
All the motels in Boulder were full.
Where did you stay?
I stayed at the Bluebird Lodge in downtown Gold Hill. There's one room in which actually I could get cell service. It's very few places in Gold Hill you could. But I was keeping generators running so that we could have bathrooms and running water for firefighters and coffee. Basically, the coffee pot was full 24 hours a day for 3 weeks, and just the more comfortable the firefighters are, the better a job they're going to do. And so we were making them as comfortable as we could.
So was the Gold Hill Inn a hub for the federal and state?
Oh yes. Oh yes, everybody. Yeah, it was the unofficial emergency operations center for Gold Hill. And it was just something, we weren't, like I said, we weren't going to leave. And it probably worked out a whole lot better that we didn't, because when they would come in, when new people would come in, we had computers set up and printers set up. We could supply them with maps. We could supply them with a firefighter to go with them for the first couple of hours and show them where things were, and just let them know about the local area.
How do you think that affected all of these new firefighters who weren't aware of the topography around here? How do you think that affected their firefighting?
I think, I think it helped out a lot with having a local person, and that is, as a rule, you usually try and get a local, but I don't think in Sunshine and Fourmile they had that. I'm not positive, but I don't think they did, just because basically the firefighters had been told it was time to leave, and so.
How many firefighters do you think came through Gold Hill while you were still up here?
Hundreds. I really couldn't. I saw trucks from, well, let's see, Rye, and I mean, the way it's southern Colorado. We had them from more than just Colorado. We had feds from all over. I don't know how many fire departments we had from out of the state. But I don't. There were just lots. I mean, just trucks you just wouldn't even think you'd see up here.
How did all of the firefighters communicate and sort of do these handoffs from jurisdictions? Oh,
well, just through, basically we have really good radio protocols, and it all worked good. The biggest problem for me was that the handoffs were handled down at the Boulder County Fire Training Center, which is down by the Boulder Reservoir. And I wasn't going down there because it basically, so when the new command person, not the command person would stay down there. The new division superintendent would come up every morning and meet with the nighttime superintendent, and they would have their meeting, and then they would do, because it was Gold Hill and we were there, they would bring all their people together and do another briefing in Gold Hill. Probably a little finer tuned than the briefing they had down at the fire training center. And so that's kind of, that was like every morning and every evening. That was.
After the fire threatened Gold Hill on the first day, where did it move to?
I don't know. I mean, it didn't. Basically, it went out in fingers a lot of different directions. Because of the amount of radio traffic that was going on, I am not sure exactly where. I know we had one that was threatening to go down Left-Hand Canyon from the Sunshine side. But besides that, I am not sure.
How long was the fire sought solely by volunteer firefighters?
Solely by, well, we had feds in way early on the scene. We had the feds were, the guys who get paid were probably by 3 or 4 in the afternoon were digging fire line between Mont Alto and Emerson Gulch. So yeah, no, early on we had paid firefighters.
When was it obvious that this was going to be far larger than its initial fire in a pit was is the official?
It was shortly after we got out there and saw how. Shortly after we got to Dixon Road, when the decision was made that, well, the fire trucks are kind of useless. We don't need water. Water is not going to do anything here. That's when we needed drip torches and cats to fight it with, and that's when you know it's going to be a long time till it gets out.
How was it decided where to employ firefighting resources when it was still a pretty local effort?
Well, it was easy at first because the fire was coming at us. When it split off, that is about the time that Boulder County took the fire over. It's also, I mean, basically we stayed as long as we could at Dixon Road. There was another group that went up and started back burning up at the ranch, and there were several other groups that were just around in different spots and getting high ground so that they could report to the new division superintendent, as to what was going on. He was making the decisions at that point. He's a fire, I think he's a captain from, it's used to be Cherryvale Fire. It's Rocky Mountain Fire now. But he was, making the decisions. And he was also talking to the command in Boulder. So,
Was it part of your responsibility to make sure that people were evacuating?
No. That was, they had sheriff's officers and park rangers were doing all that. They were going around door to door. They were yelling through their speakers in the front of their cars, and that's kind of the deal we have with the sheriff's department, is that we need them there to do that because we can't fight fire and get people out at the same time.
Did you know anybody who willfully disobeyed?
Willfully disobeyed? I did. You mean early on, or?
Both early on, or people who came back?
Early on, I don't know that there were. It didn't really matter to us because basically everybody had been told to evacuate. There was a wall of flames coming at us. It's like, if they're not gone, there's nothing we can do for them. We have to concentrate on keeping ourselves safe and saving what we can, but we can't be checking every house to see if there's a person in there. Later on in the thing, yes, there were people who came back who, many of them got in the way and slowed firefighting efforts down, because basically every time when you're working a fire down here, you always have a lookout person who is, even if there's no flames, if there's just smoke, who is watching your backside. And so every once in a while the lookout would see this person wandering around. And so everything would have to come to a halt and have to get the person out of there, because it wasn't safe for anybody if there was more people in there.
What were they coming back for?
We had several people who were coming back taking pictures of people's burned houses and placing them on the internet, and we don't know what else they were doing, whether things were disappearing or what. But basically the whole area was a closed area. Nobody was allowed in without firefighting or law enforcement credentials, and these people were sneaking in and like I say, displaying people's burnt houses and belongings on the internet for everybody to see. And these people hadn't been told whether their houses had burned or not. They would just stumble upon them on the internet, which is really bad for them.
Was this malicious, do you think?
I don't think the person who did it thought it was malicious, but it's in so many ways it's no different than if somebody in your family dies. You don't want to find out about it on the news. You'd rather hear about it officially from somebody and not have pictures of them all over the place. And so yeah, this person, I think they thought they were helping out, but they kept getting run out of town, and so they had to know that it wasn't right what they were doing.
How did most of that information get communicated down to the evacuees?
Well, basically we had our town, not really government, but our town council, which is just a town meeting. The chairman of that, who is also a firefighter and got very mad at me because I wouldn't let her stay up here and fight fires because I needed her in Boulder. She was our communication point, so I could get a hold of her in Boulder and get information to her. She could get a hold of me in Gold Hill and we could work information both ways there. And so we could get stuff out pretty quick that way.
Do you know how the information was being communicated among the evacuees?
It was mostly on the internet. We were very lucky, and actually I found out about it. Our phones only went out for a short time, and that was only because my understanding is that the phones probably everywhere are powered by a battery if the power goes out. And so all they had to do was bring up a generator and plug it in, and the phones were all back again. And so, like I said, we were only out for a little while. And so then it got real easy when they came back on, because I had 3 computers set up in the restaurant, and we could communicate with, anybody with email. So it was pretty easy.
Could you tell me a bit about your initial reactions to seeing most of Gold Hill standing, and then also seeing Colorado Mountain Ranch?
Well, I mean, it was joy. That the hardest part was leaving Gold Hill. Coming back was nice and easy, and I mean, yes, it was a very joyous. Even though the fire was still up there on top of the hill, just above Gold Hill, the flames weren't touching the sky anymore. It was a lot more smoke than flames, and it was just real happy. And well, so much with the ranch the same way, because the big old lodge that's, I don't know, 100+ years old was still standing. And houses and corrals and barns got lost, but the really historic building was still there, which was nice.
Have you helped them rebuild at all?
Not physically. I've worked a lot with Mike. We replaced because we got new fire boots. So I took a whole bunch of our old rubber fire boots up to him, so that he had muck boots for the corral when the horses come back, and just lots of time talking and working things out on the phone, etc.
What were you thinking when you left Gold Hill?
We all assumed that Gold Hill was gone. It was like, okay, it's done. And I was really sad. I mean, I'm the type of person, I live in Gold Hill. I leave Gold Hill once a week normally to get groceries, and that's it. I don't really like going to the city. So that was really hard.
Had you moved out of Gold Hill ever?
When I was 18 years old, I left for a couple years. But besides that, no, I've been in Gold Hill all the time.
There's a Denver Post article about the Fourmile Fire that quoted you as saying that the firefighting system is flawed, but it's necessary for everyone's safety. Could you tell me a little bit more what you meant by that?
That actually, I think, was Norman, but I know what he meant. Okay.
They quote you.
Oh, okay.
That's amazing.
Because Norman was telling him that. Norman is the chief of Indian Peaks Fire. Basically, it's flawed because every time a new group comes in with their rules and regulations, this is when it goes from the locals, us fighting the fire, to the county, to the state, to the federal levels, is that many times the local people are left out of it, with the ones with the knowledge of where the mine holes are, where the fences are, where the water is, the important stuff. They're left out because they haven't taken that class. They don't have a piece of paper that says they're qualified to do the job. And that's where it's really bad. It's necessary because they don't really know what you know how to do. Just because I've been a fire chief for 14 or 15 years, they don't know that. They come into town, I'm a fire chief, that's all they know. If I had this paperwork that said I was, a crew boss or a command or whatever, then they would know that I had the same training as them. So yeah, that's why it's bad in some ways, but necessary.
Do you think that there was an issue with that in the Fourmile Fire in particular?
Oh, well, that was early on, I mean, that was why they did not want us here, is because we didn't have the qualifications. So yes, there was a problem with that. And I had, like I said, I had an argument with the division superintendent, but by the time he left, we were friends. So we all worked it out.
By the time he left after the argument, or by the time he left after the whole fire?
About a week later. No, we argued several times over a week. But he did keep bringing gas up for me, so, I mean, not a lot, but.
What were the most and least effective strategies that firefighters employed during the Fourmile fire, do you think?
Well, we didn't really have time to have a strategy. We were doing more running than anything else. I mean, the strategy was to burn out where we could and then get out of there. So, I mean, that was the strategy. It was just bigger than anybody. And we've all trained enough to know that nobody's life is worth it. Unlike in some of the past years, not really locally, but some of the major wildland fires in the country, the number of people that have been lost because they're trying to protect something, or because they don't know, they don't know the topography, they don't know the weather, they don't understand the weather in the area. That's why you have people like me from here who know what happened every day, and then you just keep backing your people up. It's like, it's time to leave, it's time to leave. And then we kept doing that.
Is it a hard balance to get between it's time to leave and I want to save the one place that I love more than anything?
Oh, the first time was hard. After that, it was easy. It's like, when something that big is coming at you, it's just, after the first time you've given up, you understand, we're going to save what we can, but there's probably not going to be much.
What were the conditions at the time that made the Fourmile fire so destructive and hard to fight?
Well, okay, there were several factors. It was the morning weather report that I read about a week or two later it was 5% humidity. There were upslope winds, which means they were coming from the east instead of the west where they normally come from. They were expected 50 to 60 mile an hour gusting winds. There was a front that was coming through, and basically when a front comes through, it means as it comes through, you get winds from every direction. The topography was really bad. There was a very steep slope, and it's one that we've always known that was going to burn. Basically, the homeowners had done lots of mitigation, not enough. Not all of them had done enough. The ones who lost their houses found that out. But there's, those people who moved up to the mountains so they could live in a cabin in the middle of the woods, they lost their houses. Because if you live in the middle of the woods, you get the same as the rest of the woods. But yeah, it was the perfect storm. How
did your experience with the Fourmile fire compare to your experience with like Black Tiger fire? Any of those?
Totally different, because when you're going to somebody else's district to fight a fire, it's the people somewhat. You aren't that close to them, but it's not your backyard where you're putting a fire out. It's and also you're not there usually for the initial part. You're usually there. They're calling you in, but it's going to take you an hour or so to get there, usually to the other fires. And this was right there, up close and personal. Yeah, most fires is usually cutting fire lines, make them so they can't get you, but that they don't usually move that fast.
How do you think that this fire has impacted Gold Hill and Fourmile and Salina, all the communities, Sunshine?
It's in the good impacts. It has brought the community a lot closer together. It's going to be ugly for several years. Besides that, I mean, the erosion. We are now worried about if we get more than half an inch of rain in an hour, then that 4 Mile is probably in big trouble, because there's nothing left to hold back the water, because it used to be all the pine needles that filled up the forest would soak up that water, and now there are none left. And so everything will wash down the side of the hill. But on the side, the humanity side, I think that the majority of people, it brought a lot of people together. There are some very unhappy folks out there, and I can't imagine being them, but if you lose your house, it's there are several of them that blame the fire department for it, which we don't take personally, because it's like we know we couldn't have put it out, so and we didn't hurt anybody trying to.
Has there been any effects, like bad effects, from those sorts of people blaming the fire department?
No,
on your
I don't think
ability to
so.
work?
I'm not that I know of. How's that sound?
Right after the fire, or was it during the fire, that equipment was stolen?
During the fire, it was the majority. The first day of the fire, a lot of equipment disappeared, but we told a lot of the locals, because we knew they weren't going to leave to take equipment. It was the fact that after the fire was over and we talked to everybody, that lots of equipment didn't come back. Then we knew it was stolen. We didn't know first off that it was, actually stolen.
Has there been any sort of resolution to that?
Well, we filed police reports and reported it to our insurance company, and it's been replaced.
Could you tell me a little bit about the night that the slurry bomber crew came up to the inn?
Well, when they walked in the front door of the restaurant, luckily everybody knew, a lot of people knew about this. And when they walked in the front door of the restaurant, I think probably everybody who lived on Hill Street, that's the street this was saved, plus a lot of other people were in the front room, and they all just, they got a standing ovation. They came in, and they came in and introduced each other, and it was great, and had a few drinks, and then we took them into dinner. They walked into the dining room. I was in the kitchen at this point. I didn't know that. I just heard when they walked in the dining room. It was like thunder, because the people in the dining room heard who they were, and it was a full dining room. And so between the dining room and the front room, it was just like thunder in the building for those guys.
Have you had any contact with them since?
Not since then, no. But this was we did talk with them quite a bit, and Dell, the pilot of the big plane, said that this was like the second time in his whole career that he had ever been to where he had dropped slurry, because usually they just move on to the next place. It's the middle of the summer, and that's what they do. Is they get done here, they have lunch, and they're gone, or dinner or whatever. And so, because of the other fire up Loveland or wherever that was, they were still around, and so we were able to invite them up for dinner.
Did you get a sense from the firefighters outside of the local communities that this was an experience for them that differed from any other fire, or was it sort of run-of-the-mill?
Oh, no. This was bigger than most. This was one of the federal guys that I talked to, probably 2 or 3 days after the start. He was dispatched to this fire, and he really didn't want to come because he heard about how big it was, how many homes there were, and that it was fought by volunteer firefighters. He was afraid there were going to be bodies all over the place, because there normally are. When volunteers fight fires, there are too many of them who they think they're going to fight it to the death, and they shouldn't be, but they do. And he could not believe that there were, nobody had actually even gone to the hospital or anything. It was different than most because of how fast it went. There were I mean, area from the bottom of Emerson Gulch up to Gold Hill should have taken 8 or 10 hours, not 2. There was screaming, and so the fire behavior was just so unpredictable. Mike Tombolato, who was operations on the first part of the fire, I talked to him. He's the chief of Rocky Mountain Fire, and he was having a hard time sending firefighters in because the fire behavior was so erratic. He was just, he was looking at 100-foot flames where they shouldn't be. And he's been fighting fire his whole life and for the feds, off and on. And so, yeah, it was not your run-of-the-mill fire.
What was your primary concern in the aftermath of the fire, after it had been taken over by the feds and was, controlled?
Well, it was the fact of making sure it would. I think the same thing as when we started. It's the firefighters we worry about. The command, we really don't care about them. The firefighters out in the fields, it's like you come up to an area like this that is just strewn with mine holes and gullies, and it's like, okay, well, we can't send them guys out there without somebody to let them know what's going on. And so we were constantly going over the maps when we'd get new people in, and I'd send a couple different people out with them when they first got here, so that they could, find out what the terrain was like and find out where the danger areas. Once we got everything marked, then we could breathe a little more better.
How did the community rally for those people who did lose their houses?
Well, the way Gold Hill always does. It's with whenever there's a problem, Gold Hill comes through for their people, and actually not just Gold Hill, but early on, the second day of this fire, I got a call from Burl. He's a songwriter. He used to be a firefighter in Sunshine, used to live in Sunshine, and he called me up and said, I'd really like to be right there with you fighting the fire, but I'm old now, so I can't do that. So we're going to put a concert together for you. And originally this was just some local folks. And within 2 days, I think, it had turned into not a little tiny event in Boulder, but a major event at that event center in Broomfield. So everybody jumped on that bandwagon.
And you went out to that? No.
I had to work that night. Because basically, we were closed for 3 weeks, and so I had to work every bit I could. That's a lot of business to be losing. My wife went to that, though. I think they all had a good time.
Did anything surprise you about the community's reaction to the fire?
I don't think so. I mean, it's everybody took things really well. It was. We spent quite a bit time getting ready for them to come back, when working with the local victims advocates. That's it. And just different social departments, and so we had it all set up for them when they came back. But no, I think everything worked really good.
Were you anticipating Boulder's reaction or the nation's reaction?
No, I wasn't, because because we were here. This was our problem. This wasn't their problem. And it's just, and yes, it was their problem, because this is a historic area. This is. But no, I wasn't anticipating that at all.
What has life up here been like since the fire?
Well, luckily from my house, I can only see a little tiny bit of burned. But it's really hard to drive to Boulder, driving through all that burn. I don't know, I can't explain it. It's different. you know, I'm a different person for going through that. And I still haven't figured all that out myself. So.
Has this fire or any other fires affected your decisions as sort of business and homeowner up here versus a firefighter? No.
No. No. Basically, my house is mitigated. There's one tree in the front yard. There's a couple way back in the backyard. The grass is mowed. Basically, I keep my house that way so that when something's going on, I don't have to worry about my house. And if my house goes, it goes. That's it. That's the other thing, is that if it gets to that point, there's nothing that's going to save it. If this north side of the hill burns, there will, unless people do a lot of mitigation, which I don't foresee because it's owned by absentee landowners, and it costs money to mitigate, and I don't think that's going to happen. But if that catches fire down in Left Hand Canyon, yeah, Gold Hill will have another chance of going away.
What do you think the effect of having all volunteer fire departments up here has on the mountain communities?
Oh, it makes everybody tighter. It makes for a more caring community, because they're the ones, you know, it's not like some guys down at the station who's there hired by you. And you're it.
In hindsight, is there any advice that you would give to mountain communities, either people or governments, in terms of being prepared or defending themselves against wildland fire?
Well, just keep working. I mean, we've done a lot of work. We've done, I don't know, in the last 5 years, we've done a whole lot of mitigation work, saved a lot of houses, and that's the advice, is that if you're going to live in the mountains, is mitigate or buy lots of insurance, or both.
We're almost to the end of this tape, but is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
No.
Anything that's brought up?
No. That's.
Want to say the menu, the 2011 Gold Hill Inn menu?
No.
All right. Thank you, Chris.